of the Global Impact Relations Network. My name is Tia, and I will be your moderator during the session. So today we will be diving into how this iconic, truly iconic impact brand, Ben & Jerry's, are tackling racial injustice. And this conversation is also for us coming from the anniversary of George Floyd's death on the 25th of May, 2020. And it's really an inspirational moment for us to try and see how we can all do our part in tackling systemic racism. So about impact relations, for those of you who haven't heard about us or maybe don't know us as well, we are a nonprofit industry organization that really believes in the power of stories to drive systemic change. So we abide by a no spin policy, and we believe that communication strategies should have a social and environmental impact component that's measured and embedded in the core of that strategy. So what we're doing is we're building methodologies, we're building community around this. And it is a global community, as you heard from the name, but it's originally coming out of North America, which is also why we can see such a strong US and Canadian audience here today. And that actually brings me in on a quick note just about who I am. So my role here is as a community builder. I am originally Swedish, but based in Berlin in Germany. And my role is really to try and expand the community and expand the philosophy across continents, across borders, to really get us together. And one of the ways that we're doing that right now is by creating an online community on Slack. So I'm very psyched and excited to announce that we're actually launching this today to all of you. So for those of you who would be interested after this session to have more conversations like this and really get involved in developing that methodology with us, then you simply go to impactrelations.org/pledge. And when you pledge that you agree with our basic principles, you then get an automatic invite to the Slack community from now on. So couldn't be more excited about that. And I'm also part of the Business of Purpose community, which is more European focused and working along similar lines. So there's a great sense of community in general happening around these topics. So before we hand it over to our amazing racial justice leaders, we want to just take you through how this evening or morning, depending on where you are, is gonna go. So we're gonna start with a quick speaker overview that basically means that we'll give Ben & Jerry's the chance to tell us what the strategy is, so we're all on the same page. From there, they will do like a coordinated Q&A between them to really dive a bit deeper. And of course, from there, we really wanna hear your questions. So throughout the whole session, if you have any questions that come up, just type them in the chat box here in Zoom, and we will definitely make sure to integrate them. And we'll have more than 20 minutes for questions, so really just ask it all. We're here to learn, this is the whole purpose. And there is a giveaway, because Ben & Jerry's is a very generous organization. So if you're keen to win some ice cream and some other great goodies, then you can go on Twitter after the session and just tweet your key takeaways from tonight. So, use the @ImpactRelations and the hashtag #comms4change so we can see it. And then from there in the next 24 hours, we'll pick a lucky winner. Alrighty, so one key thing to make sure it's smooth here is just to stay muted until the Q&A so we can hear the speakers clearly. And if you want, then please keep your cameras on. We love seeing your faces, so feel free. This is all a community between us. And just remember that it's being recorded. So if you have any sensitive information or a really exciting case study that's sort of secret, maybe don't share it right now because this will be public. Alrighty, so let me just introduce these amazing people for you right now. So as you probably know, because you're here, Ben & Jerry's have an ongoing commitment to addressing racial injustice. And two of those champions are Chris Miller and Jabari Paul, who are both here with us today. So Chris has an impressive track record in consumer goods with a particular expertise in CSR and sustainability. And his educational background is political science. And so in terms of a background, he spent time with Greenpeace, he spent time with STEM Generation before making his way to Ben & Jerry's, where he's now the head of global activism strategy. And as far as personality tests go, Chris, what's your favorite Ben & Jerry's flavor?
The most important question. This is a question for which the answer changes regularly, but at the moment, my favorite flavor is vanilla caramel fudge, which is a real outlier in the Ben & Jerry's portfolio. Most of our flavors are chunks, 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 chunks. Vanilla caramel fudge is smooth. Vanilla ice cream and a smooth fudge and caramel swirl. Amazing.
Expecting a smooth talk tonight then. Jabari, you have more than 10 years of experience, both professional volunteering experience with nonprofits, with advocacy and campaigns. You're actually an ordained minister, which I already told you I found very impressive. And similar to Chris, you have a background in political science and public policy. So same to you, what's your favorite flavor?
So I am the only vegan at the corporate office. We have a few vegetarians, but I'm the only vegan. So mine would have to be one of our non-dairy chocolate caramel cluster.
Awesome. I'm sure we're all very tempted. I can also see in the comments that you guys are already typing in your favorite flavors. And actually, that's a great idea. So please just keep coming. We'd love to know. And we'd love now to hand it over to Chris and Jabari. Take it away and tell us everything about what you're doing to tackle racial injustice and what we can all learn.
Great. Thanks so much, Ida. And it's really wonderful to be with you all today. I think, as Ida suggested, I'm going to give a quick run through, sort of a setup around our approach, and talk a little bit about some of the work that we've done on issues of race and racial justice. And then Jabari's going to jump in and we're going to have a little conversation. So.
Oops, Chris, you're muted.
Oh, I was muted. All the brilliant things I said. It's great to be here. As you suggested, Ida, I'm going to step real quick through sort of some slides with our approach and a little bit of the work that we've done around issues of race and racial justice. Jabari, feel free to jump in if I miss something. So just jump all over me if you need to. And then Jabari and I will go back and forth for a few minutes. So let me quickly now share my screen, and you should see this deck. Yeah, you guys seeing it?
Yes.
Yes, excellent. Okay, so this is where it all began. Two guys, 1978, Ben on the right, Jerry on the left, and a dilapidated gas station that they turned into a ice cream shop in Burlington, Vermont, where it's cold as hell about 6 months of the year. What began sort of at this place, which is literally about 3/4 of a mile from where I'm standing right now, a sort of an empire of ice cream was born. Company was purchased by Unilever 2000. We're now a $1 billion company operating in more than 36 countries around the world. And, you know, while Ben and Jerry were two wacky dudes, they were counterculture hippies. They sort of, you know, very much believed in using their platform to advance their values. When they first started the company, as you saw in the shop there, it had sort of this fun, whimsical thing, but Ben and Jerry hadn't quite arrived on sort of this notion of using the business as a lever to advance change. And so about 3 years into the business, they got into it because they like to hang out and eat. They were spending less time hanging out and eating and more time sourcing ingredients, hiring, firing, you know, distributing products around the state. They almost sold the company, and Ben had a mentor, a restaurateur in Southern Vermont. Ben told him he was thinking about selling the company. Maurice said, absolutely, you can't sell this thing. You put your heart and soul into it. It's really been successful. If you don't like what you're doing and you don't like the way businesses are run, change the way you run your business. And that was sort of the moment at which Ben arrived around the idea that the purpose of Ben and Jerry's was to see whether a business could survive while being a force for progressive social change, right? And so this word that's now this buzzword in corporate CSR in the corporate world of purpose, Ben sort of landed on in the early 80s, this idea of a company having a purpose beyond making money, and ours was about being successful while being advocates for progressive social change. Ben said the strongest bond you can create with your customers is around a shared set of values. This idea that in doing this work and being advocates for racial justice and being advocates for action on climate change, we're not only helping advocate for the change we seek in the world, at the same time, we're connecting with our consumer base, our fan base, not just around a product transaction at the freezer case, but around a shared set of values, and that's a powerful bond. Those are consumers that don't trade us for Haagen-Dazs when it's 2 for $5 at Walmart. The corporate landscape is shifting, right? We've seen over the past year, 18 months, a real change both in society, but also in the expectations of what it means to be a corporate citizen. Many of you are based in the US, you will have seen some of the attempted rollbacks of voting rights and voter access in a number of states around the country. And what you have seen is corporations being pulled into some of those debates. If I'm honest, they're not doing this voluntarily. They're being sort of pushed into the debate, but companies who have made a commitment on the inside of their company to address issues of race and equity, diversity, equity, inclusion inside their company are being asked what their point of view is on issues relevant to those issues on the outside of their company. So consumers are increasingly looking to corporations to be a part of the dialogue around issues that society is wrestling with. So really quickly, at its heart, and this in some ways seems really crass, but you guys are all communicators, I think you'll understand this. The same set of tools that we use to sell Cherry Garcia and Chunky Monkey can be harnessed to sell ideas that systemic racism is a thing, that racism can exist without overt racists. It can be a product of the outcomes that systems and structures perpetuate. That climate change is a thing, and that it is an existential threat to humans on the planet, right? And so what all of us as communicators, and particularly as consumer-facing brands are, we're powerful selling engines. And so what we've done at Ben & Jerry's is to take those tools that we are exceptionally good at and put them in service of NGOs, civil society partners that have a strategy to change. It's different than cause-related marketing. The top example is what I would call a classic cause-related marketing campaign. It starts with, who are my consumers or my customers? Who am I talking to? What's something they believe? And how do I emotionally connect with them around that thing that they believe? So judgment-free zone here, but if you are, one of the, I'll use Dove as an example, Unilever brand. The Real Beauty campaign, many of you may be familiar with. Dove soap, women are the consumers, self-esteem is an issue for some women. It's an issue that Dove wanted to tackle. They created a series of videos that are frankly quite powerful and emotional, but they are designed to build an emotional connection in order to build brand equity. It starts with, who are you speaking to and what's something that's relevant to them? Our approach is really different. Our approach starts with us. It is, what are our values? What's the change we seek to make in the world? And then how do we build an emotionally engaging campaign that inspires our fans to be a part of making change in the world? We have a team of campaigners. This is not a marketing team. It's not a communications team. These are activism managers that we have in 8, soon to be 9 countries around the world, whose job it is to take that tool set and translate it and put it to work for the strategies of our civil society NGO partners. This team of campaigners is a critical part of how we do what we do. This is not an exercise in just marketing. Our campaigns have a clear strategy to win. They have a long time horizon. We also work with groups and partners that don't typically work with corporations. Again, no judgment here. World Wildlife Fund, WWF, has a big cause-related corporate partnership team that is built to partner with corporations. We work with groups that don't typically work with corporations. They're movement builders. They're building grassroots movements of people that can exert political pressure to make change in the world. We want to help our fans become part of those movements. So we've been working on issues of racial justice for the last 5 or 6 years. Done work on issues around voting rights. We've done work with Dr. Reverend William Barber and his Poor People's Campaign. We more recently have been working on issues around the criminal legal system. Let me give you a quick snapshot of that. There is this horrendous prison in the city of St. Louis called the Workhouse. It's old, it's miserable, it locks up almost exclusively Black folks. City of St. Louis, 50% Black, about 98%, 96% of the prison population is Black, and more than 90% are being held pre-trial solely because they don't have access to cash bail. We've brought our unique set of tools, our ability to communicate, buy ads, target voters and citizens, Ice Cream, our co-founders, Ben Cohen, our ability to use our CEO to do op-eds, and put all of those in service of the grassroots coalition of people on the ground in the city of St. Louis who want to close this miserable prison, take the $14 million a year that they spend on it and shift it to things that protect public safety, like access to job training, housing, substance use treatment, et cetera. And it worked. After 2.5 years, the campaign was successful in closing this prison, shifting funds. That actually will happen on July 1st of this year. And so it's a big deal. It's a big win. And we were a small part of making that happen. We use the stories that come out of this grassroots campaign in St. Louis to paint the bigger picture of why the system needs to be reformed nationally. From time to time, I'll spend a lot of this. We use our platform to make statements on issues that are relevant at any given moment. And those statements, really, the day-to-day work is the foundation that gives us the credibility and authenticity to create these statements. This was our response to the murder of George Floyd just about a year ago. It is the most widely engaged thing we've ever done as a company. Remarkably, this had over 3 billion impressions on digital, social, and earned media channels, which seems incredibly hard to believe. And I think it says much more about the times we're in than I think the work that we do, but that a message from an ice cream company would resonate the way it did. So finally, in closing, before I open it up for Jabari and I to have a quick chat, this is not marketing. This needs to be anchored in something you believe, not appropriating something that you believe your consumers believe. You want to put those impacted and on the front lines at the center of the strategy. You really want them to lead the strategy, as we did in the case of the city of St. Louis. This was their plan, their strategy to win, and it worked. Focus on impact, right? This is not cause-related marketing focused on building brand equity. This is about making change in the world. It's hard. Not everyone agrees with you all the time. We get a lot of blowback. So let's all get a little comfortable being uncomfortable and understand that building a successful brand while at the same time driving impact, understand that the goal here is not to be inoffensive to everyone, right? There are going to be people that disagree with what you do, but in doing this work, we create a consumer base that is intensely loyal and loves this brand. And if I'm honest, a lot of people say, oh, you're Ben & Jerry's, you can do this, we can't. We are, Jabari notwithstanding, we are a majority group of white folks in the second whitest state in the country. If we can step out and be advocates for addressing white supremacy and systemic racism, I think anybody can do anything. So with that quick run through, I will take a pause and ask Jabari to jump on. Let me stop sharing my screen.
Well, you did a great job as always, Chris. The only bills that I would say, and Chris touched upon this a little in the last slide, which is that another part of the uniqueness of our approach, I would say, is that we're really intentional about centering the voices of people from various walks of life and with various lived experiences. Their input matters a lot. And then I think the greatest value add that we're often able to bring to our partners in the campaigns, because we're not the foundation that does a lot of direct giving, is that through using our platforms and channels, we're often able to help people break outside of their echo chambers. So we're very clear, Chris talked about who we are as a company. We're also very clear about who our audience is. It is a diverse audience, but it does trend slightly younger, slightly whiter. But I think that the greatest value add is helping to elevate messages who our partners, to audience who our partners may not ordinarily be able to reach, spread those messages to those groups. And just a quick shout out before we go into our conversation. One of our partners and friends is on this platform with us, Cedric Brown, who used to work with the Advancement Project National Office. And Cedric was certainly involved in that work that we did in St. Louis. So just a quick shout out to him.
Great. Thanks for that, Jabari. And maybe why don't I go ahead and let's briefly touch on this question that Sam dropped in the chat, this issue of Israel and Palestine, because it is one that's been sort of blowing up. And in many ways, it's a good example of this idea of being comfortable getting uncomfortable. You know, when you're an outspoken brand, when you're driven by a strong set of values, we're held perhaps to a higher standard. We have, as advocates for issues of racial justice in the US, and many years working on issues of kind of the refugee and asylum seeker crisis in Europe, there's been a lot of pressure of late on us around our business operations in Israel. And we just say it's a complicated issue. We have a long-term relationship with our partner in Israel, who we've been working with since 1987. And if I'm honest, this has been a struggle for us internally. So I don't have a satisfactory answer for folks. You know, it is clear that the plight of the Palestinian people is very much connected to the struggle for justice here in the US and in other places, and that the occupation is illegal, and the rights of the Palestinian people have for decades been denied. I think, so I'll leave it at that. It's hopeful you will be hearing more from us on this issue. This is what it means to be a business who has a point of view on issues in the world. We are often challenged and to speak up and to use our platform. So I appreciate the question. I wanted to acknowledge it because I don't want people to think we're running away from it. Maybe Jabari, let me ask you a question. How do we measure the success of what we do?
We measure it, one, by how our partners measure it. And a lot of times that is winning on campaigns, whether we win or lose. And we recognize that, in trying to impact systemic change that is not linear work. Chris did a real quick run through of our work in St. Louis. What should be said about that was that the aldermen in St. Louis had passed a resolution to close the workhouse last year. They walked back that decision, right? And then we engaged in nonpartisan voter messaging to help elect a mayor who ultimately came back and decided to follow through on that commitment to shut down the workhouse. So ultimately it's whether or not we win on campaigns, because that's what's important to our partners. The other thing is that besides trying to help organizations over these watershed moments, because an initial question that we often ask ourselves is, given our tools and channels, where do we bring the most value add? Chris and I are very passionate about a range of issues, as well as our company is. And so when it comes to looking at kind of deciding on where we weigh in, it's really considering where do we bring the greatest value add. And so a part of that is also influencing consumer behavior and trying to figure out, looking at our ability to be able to convert our fans into activists in these campaigns. So we also measure success by the number of fans we're able to engage in these campaigns and turn into activists at the end of the day. Because for us, it's not just about winning on campaigns. It's also about engaging our fans, our following in these movements and causing them to care about the same things that we care about, or at least raising their awareness about the issues that we're addressing. Let me toss let me toss a question at you, Mr. Miller. You are the global activism strategist. As you said during the presentation, you oversee a team of people who do what I do in the United States across the world. What's the thread that connects all of our work together?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at what we do, racial justice in the US, working on climate in Australia, working on refugee and asylum seeker rights in Europe, and we have a point of view on immigration in the US and LGBTQ and trans rights. And if you look at it, it's sort of, you might get the sense that we're all over the place. I think we are not a company that is a one thing company, right? We're not a Tom shoes, if you buy one, we give one, or we're just focused on cleaning up rivers. We have these progressive values that Ben and Jerry and our board created a bunch of years ago. And they really fall into these three buckets, right? It's a focus on human rights and dignity. It's a focus on economic and social justice, and a focus on environmental sustainability and regeneration. And I guess, right, what we want to do in those three areas is think about, how do we live those values in the day-to-day operations of our business? So where are we sourcing ingredients? How do we treat our employees? How are we working to reduce our environmental footprint? Day-to-day operations, using our business model to do less bad, more good. And then how do we do what you and I and the rest of the team does, which is to use the influence that we have as a company, our connection to our consumer base, our position of privilege and power, to, as Ben said and realized so many years ago, to be advocates for progressive social change. So those core values, those three areas are really, they're broad, but they're the guardrails that kind of, and the thread that unites the work. And maybe with that being halfway through, we throw it back to Ada for some questions from folks.
Exactly. We're going to be hiring you as the moderator next time, Chris. You're doing such a great job here. First of all, on behalf of everyone who's been commenting and also the Impact Relations Network, I want to say a huge thank you for your honesty in how you're approaching these topics and these questions. We really appreciate it. And I think this is where the real learning comes. So to bring it out to all of us to really get in conversation with you, I would actually love to invite those of you asking questions to unmute yourselves and actually ask your questions directly. So let me start with Whitney.
You still want pancakes? Yeah.
Someone's not on mute despite not asking a question. Margarita,
pancakes.
Can you mute yourself, please? I feel like pancakes is an appropriate topic for.
Yeah, totally.
I'm more interested in the pancake question, I think.
I am too.
So my question is kind of related to, there's so many different issues affecting our nation, our globe. How do you decide? I know Ben and Jerry's has specific campaigns that you work on over time, and you put commitment and energy into those while also kind of responding in real time to events that are unfolding. So what kind of advice do you have for other brands that are kind of just getting involved in this space and are like, wow, like we're getting our employees asking us to stand for issues, our consumers, our investors, we just don't know where to start or where to focus our energies?
Go ahead, Jabari.
Yeah, I don't mind taking the stab at that. So just one, Chris has been at the company much longer than I have, and I credit him in many ways for being the architect of a lot of the activism work that we do in the States. But speaking specifically to our work around racial justice over the past few years, it really evolved in a very organic way, right? And Chris can push back on this if the narrative seems off in any way. But we started off working around the Voting Rights Act and with Color of Change and the NAACP. That put us in contact with Reverend William Barber. We worked with him. It was through our kind of reaching out and building a relationship with Desmond Meade down in the state of Florida, pushing for rights restoration of returning citizens, that we got connected in supporting some of the work that Dream Defenders does. But I guess the simple, concise answer to that is I can't underscore enough, at least from my standpoint, how important it has been for us to kind of root ourselves deeply in the movement, because where we focus has depended a lot on the input that has come from people who are working within the movement space, right? And that's come from us being intentional about building those deep and authentic relationships with them. So it's not like a process where Chris and I start off with a giant whiteboard at the beginning of every year. We do a little landscape analysis and all of that, but it really comes from trying to keep our ears as close to the ground as possible and our pulse on what's happening in the movement, so that when we are addressing these issues, we know that they're relevant, we know that they're timely, because they're the issues that matter to the people who are engaged in movement building work.
And just a real quick build, I think it's critically, I believe it's critically important to root there's no perfect issue, right? We could work on one of 1,000 different issues. It's as much art as it is science. It just feels right, but rooted in something real. People may disagree with an issue that you may be tackling, but what you don't want is for them to criticize the reason why you're doing it. So be very clear about why you're doing it, because it's something you believe, it's something your employees believe, it's something your company was founded on, it's something related to your business. It's fine if people are going to disagree with you. What you don't want is to have people charge that you're not doing it for a genuine reason. So rooted in something real.
And Cedric, you just raised your hand, and we know from what we just heard that you've actually been involved in one of these campaigns. So I'm very curious to hear what you want to say right now.
Sure, I won't talk too much about it, but my question is, Jabari, and thank you very much for the generous shout out. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between your breadth partners and your depth partners?
Sure, happy you asked that. So Cedric is alluding to kind of the way we approach these campaigns. There's usually always breadth and depth to them, right? And breadth for us is trying to engage as many of our fans as possible. So from a kind of footprint standpoint, we're a very bi-coastal company, right? Most of our shops are, we have roughly 300 shops in the United States. Most of those are along the East Coast and the West Coast. But we want to engage everyone across the country, regardless of where our footprint is. And so we usually have large scale digital acquisition campaigns where we're trying to bring everybody into a funnel and drive people towards a call to action, and really help build the listservs of our partners, like Color of Change, like ACLU and others. The depth work is picking a few markets across the country where we can actually drive real impact, right? Where it can lead to some sort of systemic change, whether that be in policy, practice, or culture change in that environment. So through working with the Advancement Project, as you know, Cedric, we were focused on the two key markets that we were focused on with our Justice Remix campaign was in Miami and St. Louis. You all have heard about the work in St. Louis. In Miami, that was partnering with an organization that's an affiliate of Advancement Project National Office called the Power Youth Center for Social Change, where we were working with them, a primarily youth-led campaign to get school resource officers out of classrooms, because what students themselves recognized was that the ratio of students to police were 1 to 10, and the ratio of students to social workers, guidance counselors, mental health providers in school was much kind of higher than 1 to 10. And there was a spike in suicide rates after the Parkland shooting in Florida. And so these were these students who were decrying, who said that we don't need more police officers in school. What we need is more mental health professionals, social workers. And so we supported their campaign to get the Miami-Dade School District to invest more in those types of resources versus funding, I think, the fourth largest school police department in the country, because certain school districts have police forces of their own. And so that was some of the depth work that we did as a part of our Justice Remits campaign. But there's typically both breadth and depth to our campaign, some large scale digital acquisition, as well as some on the ground work with community organizations.
And in terms of that, and maybe Cedric, you can actually also shed some light on this, how would you say that you approach finding those culture change people, those true activists that you really want to collaborate with? And what would be your top tips for those of us who are working with brands that want to start that kind of strategy?
Jabari, I know the story of how you found Advancement Project. I'll put words in your mouth, basically. You were working as an activist in Florida for voting rights in a previous life, and then you were hired by Ben & Jerry's. But you had a relationship with Advancement Project through your voting rights work in Florida with our general director, general counsel, and one of our activist rights persons in Florida. So having that established relationship, you went to Ben & Jerry's, and when you guys started thinking of this flavor, when it like predated me, the research for it, you thought of Advancement Project because it's a national organization that focused on building power. Like there are other, like the other big national organizations like NAACP and ACLU that mostly focus on suing people. But the Advancement Project actually was going into communities themselves and asking the people like what they really want and hearing them out. And so the organization combines legal expertise with communications expertise. But having that prior relationship with Jabari is what allowed us to formulate this flavor over time and be able to release it for a limited time.
Thanks, Cedric. Actually, I wonder if you can respond to this as well, that I'm curious about, Jabari and Chris. How much would you say that your personal passion for these topics, and given all of your background in political science and your personal convictions around racial justice, how does that influence the success of your work? Because of course, as much as we talk about brands are run by people, and you are the ones building these campaigns with these pre-existing relationships. So how would you say that that plays into your success?
I think it plays into our success greatly. You know, Cedric put his finger on a very important point that Chris also highlighted in the presentation he did, which is that, you know, most of the people who sit on our activism team don't have an MBA degree. We haven't spent years in the corporate sector. We come directly out of the movement space. And something that I've been saying to companies, and, you know, call me biased because I consider myself forever an organizer, but, you know, one way to engage within this work authentically is to really consider hiring people with diverse backgrounds and from the movement space. But I think that activism team that Chris showed you, we all deeply care about these issues. We debate them robustly internally in open honesty and transparency. But it matters a lot. And at the end of the day, I mean, I think that we feel comfortable moving forward with this work because we know that we're doing it for all of the right reasons. And, you know, there's an apparatus around us that really supports that because, you know, we're fortunate that we don't have kind of like a sales team pushing on us to make these decisions for, you know, certain reasons, and our integrated marketing team who supports our work, that they are, you know, they are true partners in thinking about how do they work with us in bringing about that positive social change that Chris mentioned. But it's very important.
Yeah, and I'll add that it was really at Advancement Project. I'm not there anymore. I left last year, but they really pride themselves on being a largely Black and brown led organization. And, you know, what helps that organization be able to speak to the issues is that you're hiring people that have the lived experience of the people that you're trying to serve. And so when I was doing like the digital aspects of Justice Remix for our organization, it helped that you had, like I had a little bit of a personal experience of being coming from a school district. I was like at heavy police officers and not having a guidance counselor consistently for one school year. So when you're able to relate to the work that the people that you're doing the work for, if that makes sense,
Yeah, definitely.
it makes it that much easier to have your passions aligned.
Right. And thanks, Hendrik, for bringing in the on-the-ground grassroots perspective as well. That really adds another layer. Chris, how would you answer that question?
I would just say, I think people's passion for these issues is what makes it work at Ben and Jerry's. I mean, I think, you know, I think for people like Jabari and myself, it's obvious it's why we're doing this work, but we partner up with folks on our marketing team that are really the executing side of what we do. And those guys are as equally committed to doing this work. I think, you know, the day-to-day business of running an ice cream company can be very much a 9-to-5 affair. I think a lot of the work that we do around these issues falls outside of that. And we have a committed group of people who, you know, if something happens in the world, I mean, I'll use frankly, the Israel-Palestine thing as an example. There have been ongoing back and forth with the full team, marketing team, management, others across weekends, evenings. This work sort of doesn't fit into the, you know, and so you have to have people who are motivated by this and believe in it to kind of to keep that cadence of work up. So it is important. And, you know, people who come to work at Ben and Jerry's often come to work at Ben and Jerry's because of what we do.
And on the topic of influences and how you're working as teams, also curious to hear how you're actually impacted by the fact that you are a part of Unilever. So I'm sure many people that represent brands here want to take a social stand, but then face pressures or doubts from a larger holding company or being part of a larger organization. So first question, how did you pull that off? And how did that work out in terms of being part of a larger context? And then secondly, is there ever a moment where what you're standing up for within Ben and Jerry's makes your partner company uncomfortable? And how do you manage that?
Wait, we're owned by Unilever? The answer to the question, there are a few things that are part of the magic. The first is, be honest, in 2000, when Unilever made an offer to purchase the company, Ben and Jerry and the co-founders didn't want to sell the company. It was a publicly traded company. Ultimately, at the end of the day, Unilever offered 2x for the shares of Ben and Jerry's that they were trading for, and so it went to a shareholder vote, and the company was acquired. In the process of this, both Ben and Jerry's and Unilever, in good faith, negotiated what is an almost unique acquisition agreement within the corporate world. Typically, when a large corporation consumes a smaller one, essentially all functions of that company roll up to the parent. In the case of Ben and Jerry's, what happened was the independent board of directors that the company was required to have as a publicly traded company, after the acquisition, instead of being dissolved, was retained. And that board was enshrined with the legal authority over the company's social mission and brand equity. Financial sort of responsibility for the company accrued to Unilever, but that board, literally meeting today and tomorrow, quarterly board meetings, is enshrined legally with the social mission. That means that we can pursue the work that we do, rooted in our values, in order to advance the social mission with or without Unilever's, you know, alignment or consent around it. And so, you know, that means that there are times when we have a different point of view from our parent company. We were dogged campaigners for mandatory labeling of genetically modified food. Our parent company were very strongly against that. We spent almost 2 years publicly campaigning for that. In fact, I once sat across the table from my colleague at Unilever on opposite sides of the table. We have deep respected partnership between the Ben & Jerry's family and the Unilever family. Unilever is without a doubt the most progressive multinational corporation committed to a framework of sustainability. And I think inherent in that acquisition agreement is Unilever understood what they were buying. They understood that they were buying Ben & Jerry's, not just part of Ben & Jerry's, but all of Ben & Jerry's. And what I will say is, we are the most profitable part of the Unilever ice cream portfolio. And I think there's a reason for that. I think it's because we're Ben & Jerry's. And you know, Unilever understands that while from time to time something may blow up and make it a little uncomfortable for them, that's part of the magic that we have at Ben & Jerry's. And so it is a relationship built on an acquisition agreement, but managed day to day by communication and respect across the two businesses.
Congrats. I mean, it really goes to show how structure can really make or break an initiative in this case. And actually, this plays right into Veronica's question, because you just mentioned it might be the most profitable part of Unilever. Veronica, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hi, yes. I have lots of questions, but I narrowed it down to this one in terms of, you know, what data or insights do you have within Ben & Jerry's, especially, you know, like the change the world that is very, you know, racial and justice motivated. Is there something that supports that standing up is the right thing to do? Just because, you know, even Unilever around the 7th generation and their hashtag defund the police, it was, you know, a big I don't know, uproar in a way of, should we be doing this? Is this brand suicide? And you see it across, you know, every company nowadays when they say, should we do this or not? Even if it's the right thing to do, they're scared of losing sales because at the end of the day, they are businesses. So just curious to know any insights from your team.
Maybe I'll take a quick stab and then you can jump in and backfill if you want, Jabari. I mean, I think we don't build this work around consumer data. We don't consumer test our messaging. We don't figure out what we're going to work on based on consumer panels, right? As I said, this is rooted in the things we believe in the world. If you manage this work in a way that you're trying to be inoffensive to everyone, I promise you, you will fall on your face. That's not what this is about. What I can say is, I think we have been an incredibly outspoken brand. We've been a brand that has used our power and privilege, as Ben said, to be advocates for progressive social change. And we have grown this business year over year from that dilapidated gas station into a $1 billion ice cream empire because of who we are. So you can't look at what we've done over the years and say that it's done anything other than been a driver for the growth of our business. And I think if that's true for us, it's true for everyone. You know, you noted the post that 7th Generation did talking about the need to defund the police. Got a lot of blowback. You know, we posted a similar a couple of weeks before and had 3,000 phone calls to our consumer care line in South Burlington, Vermont. That's a part of doing this work. That's a part of becoming comfortable being uncomfortable. But there's no doubt that work that we're doing is the work we should be doing. And so I think the companies that have it the worst, and then I'll shut up, the companies that get it wrong are the companies that try to say something, but try to say it in a way that tries to thread a mushy middle. And then what you get is you get it from both sides. You get it from one side who disagrees with you, and you get it from the other side who said you're not doing it the right way. If you're gonna get grief, make sure you do it in a way that ensures that someone's got your back, that Cedric and the team, if we're, you know, if we're proponents of breaking the school to prison pipeline and working with groups in Miami, there may be cops who disagree with what we're doing, but Advancement Project has our back and says, that's right. That's what we need to do to stop locking up Black kids and getting them into the system. And that's what you need to be. If you try and squish this middle, it's just a recipe for disaster, I think.
The only build I would have is that, and Chris already made this point, but with everything Chris just said being true, our business has never suffered because of any of our positions that we've come out with. And I think that just underscores the point that Chris has made even more so.
And there's something in that about setting expectations, because you also mentioned that you've been truly authentic to the mission from the very start of the business, and that probably plays into why it's being received so well. So we'll do one last question here. I got a great one from Micah. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Sure. Yeah, and I'm curious because I feel like this is a challenge that a lot of allies and advocates have, regardless of whether it's a brand or a person. Like, how do you walk that fine line between supporting the cause or supporting change without taking over? And you know, especially since you're a well-known brand, and as you said, you know, you advertise. So how do you walk that fine line, and what advice would you give to companies that want to get involved and basically support, but not ultimately being perceived as taking over and, you know, basically overshadowing the voices of the issue or the movement that they are trying to move forward?
Yeah, that I'm happy that you asked that question, because it's something that weighs on us a lot. We never want to be accused of or participate in corporate co-opting, right, of movements. And not to keep circling back, but it really goes back to centering the voices of people with different lived experiences. But what that means is how do we, us asking ourselves the question, how do we use our platforms, our channels to elevate their message? I mean, we really become extensions of the campaign work that our partners are doing. We help add capacity to their organizations, right? So it's a little bit of both, right? It's a little bit of us finding the right moments where we can speak in our authentic brand voice the issues, but it's also a lot of us figuring out how do we raise the awareness around the messaging and around the actions that Color of Change and all of these other organizations are doing. How do we use our channels and our tools to kind of build and amplify the work that they're doing? So we try to decenter ourselves, right, and elevate the voices and the content and the actions of our partners.
I like the basically what you said, like, you know, being an extension and amplify and elevate. I'm wondering if, like, in marketing, so I have a marketing background, but as if we maybe just have to also change the terminology that we use around corporate activism a little bit, just to make sure that we are not, because right now it's like a lot about taking a stand or taking a stance, and maybe that's just not the right way to go about it or like communicate this. I don't know, I like the words that you're using to talk about it.
Yeah, one of the things that I often say when because this is work that both Chris and I do. Chris does it globally. He helps people who carry out the role that I carry to do this in every country. But we often have these meetings with different NGOs. And one of the ways that I phrase it when I'm reaching out and I'm trying to build these relationships is we want to build with you, and we want you to tell us how we can build with you. And I talk about this a lot, but it's the antithesis or the opposite of what we've traditionally seen done historically in the corporate space, which is in it's, you know, referred to as the white savior complex, right? Of corporations coming down and, you know, they want to superimpose their agenda, and it's all about altruism. and what make them feel good at the end of the day. And I think that what we subscribe to is a very different model, and it's more of something that I refer to as the barn raising model, right? Where in communities of old, everyone would bring their resources to a common place, and they would erect a barn together. So there was no one pillar where when that pillar is removed, things collapse. But that barn being raised depended on everybody bringing their resources to a common place. And so that's what we seek to do when we build these relationships and when we work around these causes. We seek to build with these NGOs. There is no one savior, there is no one hero. The community at the end of the day and the partners who we're working with, they're the heroes.
Thank you, Mikey, for that question. Actually, I'm sure we all learned a lot from that final remark. Chris, do you have something quick you want to say before I wrap up?
I think Jabari nailed it on the closing there. Well done.
Nailed it. All right. So thank you so much, Chris and Jabari, honestly, for this very illuminating conversation. The things that stood out for me, at least, was the importance of being truly authentic, which is a word we hear all the time. But what it really means is building on the foundational values of your company and making sure that that's mirrored throughout every single thing that you do. And then maybe also the impact of listening and curiosity and community building way more than just having a stance on anything per se. And to amplify and elevate what works. So thank you so much for all of that wisdom. For those of you listening right now who are not already members of Impact Relations, then please go to the link that we just dropped here, impactrelations.org/pledge, where you can join us, come along for these events. They happen every month with different industry leaders. And as I mentioned in the beginning, we also now have a Slack community. So if you jump on that pledge, you will be invited immediately and we can continue the conversation there, which we would really love to do. And if you have any key insights, which I'm pretty sure we all do from this session, tweet them at Impact Relations, #comms4change, and you might be the one getting ice cream vouchers in your mailbox and some other exciting Ben & Jerry's merch. So thank you so much, everyone, Chris and Jabari in particular, everyone for your questions, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye, everyone.
That was awesome. Thanks, guys.
Bye, that was great.